I'm about to get really deep with you here. Have you ever gone through a breakup that was so bad that you just wished that you could forget about them? Well, you're not alone. This is 2008's Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and it doesn't get much better than this. Spoiler alert, while I might be giving you my opinion on the film, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description. And for those of you that need to hear this is just a movie. All stunts for the sake of story and shouldn't be attempted on your own. Viewer discretion is advised. Meet Peter. He couldn't ask for a better life. He wakes up in the morning, pours himself a big bowl of cereal, and sits down to try and focus on his music making. He eventually finds himself chilling on the couch watching a special on his girlfriend, Sarah Marshall. Sarah shows off her hit TV show, and they eventually mention Peter as her composer boyfriend. According to the interview, things are bright for Peter and Sarah. Then they move on to a special on Elda Snow, a famous rock star. Back in the apartment, Peter gets a call from Sarah, and he finds out that she's actually on her way right now. He quickly cleans up the apartment and takes a shower. And when he gets out, she's already there waiting for him in the living room. He's happy to see her, and he removes his towel to show her his natural surprise. Guys, if you haven't done this at least once, can you really say you're a romantic? Also, if she stands there with that sort of reaction, you know you're in for a world of hurt. At least smile or look disgusted. Maybe not that one, but anything but asking to sit down. Sarah starts off with the "you know I love you" talk, and Peter immediately guesses that she's breaking up with him. She just wants him to put clothes on, but he knows that if he puts clothes on, it's over. Peter thinks that if she just holds him, it'll make things better. But after she forces a hug, she tells him that there's someone else, and walks out. That night, Peter goes to a club to meet with his stepbrother, Brian, and he tells him that Sarah broke up with him. He bluntly tells him that he needs to just get it on with someone else, and Brian reluctantly agrees to talk to women with him. That night, he sleeps with the girl from the club, and he ends up crying afterwards when he thinks back on the memories of Sarah. The next day, he heads straight to the doctor's to get checked out. And the doctor's actually a pediatrician. The doctor tells him to get over Sarah and sleep with whoever he wants. Peter does just that, and the examples we get to see here are hilarious and disturbing at the same time. One of them is so monotonous that it would kill any vibe, but the other ones keep saying hi. I want to try that now, I can't lie. The next day at work, Peter watches the clip from Sarah's show that he has to make a soundtrack for, and he just loses his composure. Later, Brian shows up at his house to check on him, and he finds Peter burning all of Sarah's pictures on the stove. Again, do not try this at home. Brian tries to get Peter to stop thinking about Sarah, but even when he looks at the Tupperware container of cereal, he can't help but think of Sarah and how she's to thank for his fresh cereal. Brian convinces him to go on a vacation, and he heads to a resort in Hawaii he remembered Sarah talking about. Once there, things seem to be going great as there's nothing to remind him of Sarah. He heads to the front desk and waits behind some newlyweds that can't get enough of each other. When Peter gets to the desk, he asks if they have any rooms available. And it turns out that they only have the expensive room available. The room's out of his price range, but he sees Sarah coming up to him suddenly. She's surprised to see him there, but he assures her that he's just trying to get away for a bit. Then Eldest Snow comes up, and it's pretty clear that he's the guy that she left Peter for. When Eldest asks if Peter's staying, Peter starts to say no, but Rachel pops up to tell them that they booked him in the suite for 4 days. When Peter goes to his room, his crying causes such a stir that Rachel has to call down to ask if he's heard a woman crying in distress. That night, Peter goes to dinner, and the host makes him even more depressed by commenting on how alone he's going to be eating alone. On top of that, he's sitting at the table next to Eldest and Sarah. Eldest tries to invite him over, but Peter decides to leave instead. Sarah chases after him to make sure that Peter isn't following her and that he's staying. Peter decides to hop over the nearby bar instead, and he tries every drink on the menu. If you haven't had a drunken rant at the bar with the bartender, have you ever had a breakup? When you're sitting at the bar with a newlywed guy that can't find the apparently mythical female body parts necessary for a good time, yeah, you know you've hit rock bottom. Rachel pops up at the end of the night to grab the bartender, and she checks in with Peter about the crying woman she's heard so much about in his room. He assures her that he'll keep it down, but everything's going to be okay. The next morning, Peter heads to breakfast, and he starts his day off with a nice cocktail before going to meet Chuck, who's going to teach him to surf. Chuck notices some pain behind Peter's eyes, and he knows there's only one solution to that: weed. But since they don't have any, surfing is the next best solution. Chuck's surfing lessons are about the same as so many jobs out here. He tells Peter to do more, then he tells him to do less. But when Peter does what he says, it's not enough of the other. Make up your mind. After a relaxing and uneventful surfing day, Peter goes back to the room where he video calls his brother, and he tells him that he's thinking of asking Rachel out. When he runs into her later, he can't bring himself to actually ask her. He sits down to enjoy the 4th of July celebration, but Sarah and Aldous show up. Aldous ends up getting called up to the stage to sing, and he sings a provocative song for Sarah. Peter heads over to the beach, and he runs into one of the chefs who offers him a beer and gives him a hug. This is the best hug ever. This guy looks like the kind of guy that could hug all your broken pieces back together. But he could also break them all over again. The chef invites Peter to come get the pig for the luau that night, and Peter gets traumatized in the process. When he gets back to the hotel, he goes right up to Rachel and asks if she wants to go somewhere. She says yes with no hesitation, and they head to a little party farther down the beach. As they get to know each other more, he tells Rachel about a rock opera that he's making, and she shows genuine interest in his little project. Just then, Rachel's ex shows up, and Rachel bares her teeth. Peter tries to defuse the situation, but he gets put down immediately. Then, the giant Pillsbury Doughboy chef that I said could break someone, pim slaps the ex. And that's the end of that. Don't mess with the teddy bears. Peter takes Rachel away to a local tiki bar, and they have a drink while talking about how she's not the kind of girl he has to dote on. After that, he remembers all the times he had to be the manservant to Sarah. When he goes to the bathroom, he finds a private photo of Rachel. But when he goes to tell Rachel about it, she already knows. Then suddenly, the singer on stage calls Peter up to the stage to sing a song from his Dracula puppet musical. In its own way, it's kind of a banger. I'd pay to watch it. When they get back to the hotel, Peter leans in for a kiss, but Rachel doesn't want to complicate things. After she leaves, Peter heads to the bar with the other hotel guys, and he mentions that he went on a date with Rachel. Just then, they point out that she's in customer service, and it's all part of her job. The next morning, Sarah gets a call about her show being cancelled, and she goes to tell Aldous, who takes it with a grain of salt. He tells her to come on his 18-month tour, and she's surprised that she didn't know about this, or the fact that he has herpes. It's a lot to process, I know, but it's better to find out now than later. When Peter walks by the bar, he finds Sarah there, and she calls him over. She tells him about the show getting cancelled, and he immediately knows what this means for her. So he sits down to have an honest conversation about her feelings about this. Peter reassures her that everything will be okay, and she gives him a little physical reassurance. Later, Peter runs into Rachel, and the two of them head out for a hike, but Sarah spots them from around the corner. Sarah seems to be catching feelings for Peter again, but now he's got eyes for Rachel. When they reach the edge of the cliff that they're walking to, Rachel jumps off the cliff, but there's almost no way to get Peter to jump. Eventually, he goes to jump, but he has the hardest time after he does some sort of weird cartwheel jump and ends up hanging onto the vines. When he does finally jump, Rachel swims over and kisses him. Later, the Pillsbury Doughboy chef comes into Peter's room and tells him that they need the room for Dakota Fanning. But they found him a room he can stay. Of course, it's right next to Sarah's, but beggars can't be choosers. Later, Peter heads to Chuck's hut and tells him that he's determined to stand up on a wave before he leaves. Meanwhile, Sarah heads to the reception desk, and she has a nice little chat with Rachel about treating Peter right. "It's too late, Sarah. Stay away, demon." I say that now, but if Kristen Bell ever came knocking, I'd never say that in 1,000 years. Back out in the ocean, Peter runs into Aldous on his board, and Aldous takes a moment to compliment Peter on his song. Peter gets upset about the fact that Aldous is actually really cool. But then he finds out that Aldous slept with Sarah a year ago. After this, any chance of a friendship is probably out the window, and he sends him away. Once he's alone, Peter jumps up on his board and rides a wave right into Aldous. When Peter carries Aldous to the shore, he helps take a piece of coral out of his leg, and he ends up passing out from the sight of blood. When Peter comes to, he's in Sarah's room, and he confronts her about the fact that Aldous had been sleeping with her for a year before they broke up. Sarah assures him that he didn't do anything wrong, but it was more about what he didn't do. Sarah tells Peter all the things that she did do to try and make things work, including therapy, but she ends up pointing out that he just didn't notice any of it. Having had enough of this talk, Peter sulks to his room next door. Want to make this any more awkward? Guess who all eats dinner that night? That's right, all four of them. And to top that off, Rachel and Peter go back to the room to get it on, and Sarah can hear them through the wall, so she wakes up Aldous. If a raunchy scene has never disturbed you, this performance will definitely do it for you. When all of that is done, Aldous ends up breaking up with Sarah because he thinks that she's still involved with Peter. But next door, Peter shares an intimate moment with Rachel when he tells her how much he loves spending time with her. In the morning, Peter wakes up in time to catch Rachel, and they agree to meet that evening. When Peter goes out to breakfast, he actually decides to not have an alcoholic drink for once. When you're so used to starting your day with alcohol like that, that's a huge step. After a serene day, Peter runs into Aldous, who's waiting on his driver to take him to the airport. Aldous opens up about how he and Sarah are done, and he tells Peter that he's good to get back with her now. Peter tells him that he's just sticking with Rachel now. But Aldous mentions the possibility of having both. Even Peter knows that he couldn't handle that, but that's not his kind of thing anyways. But where does he go afterwards? He goes right to Sarah's room. You're just asking for something to happen. They're even sitting on the bed. She does her ugly cry face while saying she loves him too, and now they're trying to get it on, but he can't get it up. Sarah tries everything she can to get it up, but nothing works for Peter. When she assumes that something's wrong with him, Peter tells her that she broke his heart into a million pieces, so his little buddy doesn't want to be around her anymore. What does Peter do next? Peter goes straight to Rachel to tell her that they fooled around, but now he knows that he wants to be with her. That's not how this works, Peter. Naturally, Rachel tells Peter that he needs to leave the hotel and the island. She tells him not to write, call, or email, so Peter tries to come up with a solution. Peter heads to the bar where he takes down the risque picture of Rachel, and he gets his butt handed to him. He takes that picture back to Rachel, and he says his goodbyes to everyone else. When he gets back to the States, he finishes his puppet opera, and he sends an invite to Rachel. She's not too happy about the idea of going to the mainland to support him, and we see that the opera goes off without a hitch. I actually kind of wish I could see that whole thing from start to finish. Where's that movie? When Peter looks out to the audience, he spots Rachel there. And after Brian's big crescendo finish, Peter goes to talk to Rachel at the meet and greet. Rachel asks him why he never called, and he says that it was because she told him not to. Peter asks her if they could hang out afterwards, and Rachel says yes without hesitation. When Peter goes back to the dressing room to change, he starts to beat himself up for not keeping Rachel there. But she comes walking in while he's naked and trying to call her. They embrace each other, and the credits roll. Naturally. I absolutely love this movie. Go check it out right now. And thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.